It used to be that you just go, hey, director, check out this tune. And then they'd be like, we like that tune. And it's like, see you at the final. And now it's like, we're not giving you the gig until you make us cry. They want to hear something that is just ready to drop in their film right now. And they've been listening to temp music for months. You're trying to sell them on your musical ideas. And you can do it with a powerful melody. I'm not saying you can't, but it really helps to send that thing to an H9000 to help sell them on the emotionality you're trying to get out of the piano, if that makes sense. It used to be that you just go, hey, director, check out this tune. And then they'd be like, we like that tune. And it's like, see you at the final. And now it's like, we're not giving you the gig until you make us cry. They want to hear something that is just ready to drop in their film right now. And they've been listening to temp music for months. You're trying to sell them on your musical ideas. And you can do it with a powerful melody. I'm not saying you can't, but it really helps to send that thing to an H9000 to help sell them on the emotionality you're trying to get out of the piano, if that makes sense.
Alrighty, and we're live. Thanks everybody for tuning in to today's Quarantide session. We're here talking about video game sound design and composition, and we are honored to be joined by Robert Dudzic, Jacob Shea, Tom Salta, and Scott Gershin. These guys have had a huge impact on the video game and film and TV landscape in terms of sound design and composition. So thank you guys for joining us. This is going to be an awesome chat. Yeah, we're really excited to have you here.
We're so excited. Me and Colin, right before this, were just talking about how, like, we're really into music. We went to school for music, but a lot of, like, our childhood formative years were really influenced by video games. And I don't even remember the last time where I lost sleep over a record, but I remember last night I couldn't sleep because of a video game. And it's just, it's so exciting to be able to talk to you guys, because a part of what makes a game so just immersive and so important, and like the storytelling to be, to just have a good flow is the music, and that's such an important part of a video game. So thank you guys so much for, like as Colin said, thank you for joining us.
So why don't we do some basic intros, and we'll just go around, and if you guys want to tell the stream just like a little bit about what you mainly do in your line of work. I guess we could start with the Eventide folks. So I'm Colin, and I'm the product manager for plugins here at Eventide.
I'm Patrick. I am the product manager for Pro Audio of H9000 and other kind of rack of effects stuff.
Then let's go to Robert.
Hey, I'm Robert Dudzic. I'm doing sound designs for movie trailers. I did sound design, all the radio stuff, and the Grand Theft Auto 4. And I do a lot of sounds for TV shows like Deal or No Deal, or Undercover Boss, the music for this, and so many other things. And I'm doing a lot of radio stations, includes Z100 in New York and all over the world, a lot of stations.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Scott.
So I'm a sound designer, sound supervisor, a mixer. I work in the video game industry, the movie industry, the streaming industry, anything that makes sound. I've done VR. Projects go from the quietest show, let's say American Beauty, to the loudest show, Pacific Rim. I just got finished doing a streaming series for effects on Hulu called Mrs. America. So whether it's sound design, sound effects, my big thing is taking sounds and helping to tell stories.
Right on. Let's go to Tom.
Hey, I'm Tom Salta, and I'm an artist, producer, composer, songwriter. I love video games. I've been in video games since 2003. I go by the artist name Atlas Plug. I've been in music since 1989. I guess I'm most known in the video game industry. I worked on 6 Halo games. I've done the Ghost Recon franchise series, a lot of the Tom Clancy things, Prince of Persia, Battlegrounds, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I do other things outside, like movie trailers and things like that, but video games is, one of my closest loves.
And Jacob.
Hey, my name is Jacob Shea. I write for whatever media will have me, and I've been involved in as of late a lot of television, primarily for the BBC. But I have a deep love of video games, and I did some with a good friend and mentor Steve Jablonski a while back. A Prince of Persia release and two Gears of War video games, and then I also did some additional writing with Hans on Modern Warfare 2.
So some of you guys have worked on the same series. Have any of you ever been on the same project together?
Tom and I have.
Yes.
And I will give a shout out to Tom. So we did, I forgot what project it was. Shoot. We did a gig together. He had such amazing low end, and he would do these like giant octave drops. And the reason why that's really important is I used that demo of the video of the cinematic we did together to test speakers.
Wow.
Wow.
And I went in and shout out to Tom.
Wow.
This is news to Tom too, so that's awesome.
That's like the holy grail for a sound for you to use anything as a tester. That's
it was great. So I went to, I won't say where, but I went to a place that had lots and lots of speakers. And I said, I want to do this one piece. And it was like very cybery, and it did this great octave drop. And it was amazing what speakers could reproduce it and what couldn't.
Yeah.
And they were and a lot of them were like, nope, doesn't do it. That does it. And that became part of the criteria.
Wow.
So there you go.
That's news to me. Wow, Scott.
Tom, I want this truck.
Yeah.
I have to check in my speakers.
And then Robert, you and I were on something too. What was that?
Grand Theft Auto?
The trailer for the Netflix for the Amazon series.
Oh, what was that?
The one with
the same trailer with it.
Hunters.
Hunters? Yeah.
Oh, I know that show, dude.
I'm sorry. There's like so many of them. It's like, that was like months ago. But
Yeah,
guys,
we worked on the trailer together,
but we just met,
No, we worked on the trailer. I'm like, what?
But Tom, just tell the story how we met, how this whole thing happened.
Well,
Because that's interesting.
You reached out to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you wrote this amazing note. And like, hey, I've known you for like, I've been following you for 9 years. I'm like, what? Why didn't you come to me? 9 years? What are you waiting for? I've been here.
You're getting sometimes you get like one shot to go meet somebody, and you just don't want to blow the chance.
I feel you.
He's nervous.
Hey, and Robert and I are one of the few people that are on the East Coast that are in the business, right?
So we're like hour and a half from each other.
That was awesome. He came over and he made all this amazing sound design. Most people bring a pie. You're like, hey, nice to meet you. Here's a bottle of wine. He comes with like a hard drive of sounds. Like, here you go. That was amazing.
I give you my custom instrument.
Right. I was honored. But anyway,
that's a great way to meet somebody. I'm gonna take that idea.
Blink Pie. You're bringing the Eventide plugins. Here you go.
That's right.
Yeah.
Check this out. Mangleford.
It's an eye lock. There you go.
Here's my eye lock key.
This is what I pretty much do. Like I get most of my gigs. When I'm working in sound design, I just go to people. I bring like a USB drive, and there you go. And you just gotta stop and speak with the confidence. And if people listen, this is how I get my first gig with Heaviosity when I was working in the Damage. I just go to the guys and this time I get my CD player that was 10 years ago, and I say, could you listen this? And they put the headphones and okay, the name is ending. Week after the guys call me, and we've been working 2 years for them on Damage.
And that was how you started that relationship with them.
And Damage opened door for me. We work with Project Sam, with Steinberg, with Roland right now. It's
a cool plugin. I mean, I was telling you over email, but that was one of the first bigger purchase software instruments that I was like, oh man, I want to get into Damage, and I didn't know that was something that you'd worked on until last week.
But you know what the funny thing? I'm probably the only one guy who never used Damage. No, seriously, guys. The moment Damage was released, I hear every trailer on TV shows everywhere. Because I did most of all the hits, sound design, performing the. I even freaking watching the Fox News sometimes, and you hear a swells of the cymbals going. I say, okay, I still have the picture from the session. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know exactly
using this stuff, and it's just weird. And so many games and everywhere. So.
Well, then you already have that skill, right? The skills needed to create a sound library like that. So you can still have those skills to.
Oh, there's
create the next.
Tom was select who get from me my private, selection of the stuff. What I lately been doing for the last few years, what I learned from the Damage, and it's pretty cool, I think.
So in terms of sound design, do you guys have a specific approach for recording sounds that are realistic in a game, like gun sounds, animals, like glass breaking, stuff like that? Is there a different approach to recording those because it's a video game, or are you still, and is there a difference in approach then to for film, for instance, if you're trying to capture those same sounds?
I think that the sounds for a game, it's got to have the impact and sounds almost like when people are watching a lot of action movies, because most of the people who's playing video games, Halo or what's in there, Call of Duty, or any other action, it's pretty much the sounds on the level on the movie. So it's always, the way how I do sounds, I usually go and I record a reference sound, example, a gunshot, and I record different reference sound. Then I bring them in the studio and keep this as a main gun sound. Then I'm recording all kind of a mechanical stuff. Let me just show you one thing quickly.
Yeah, sure.
The joys.
I record.
Got all the auxiliary.
I'm the one-man show, so when I go, I don't gonna bring 20 microphones, I bring shotguns and maybe a couple mics. Then I come back and I get myself a little door lock, old one. And when you move this inside, you're starting getting all this lock and load sounds.
Wow.
I get all kind of different gears
Yeah.
that I'm using, and I'm recording them. Then I put compression, beat them up, and replacing the sequence with the stuff what I record. So basically, like overstacking them together. And when I have, then then I recreating like the impact sounds. You know what I mean? Then basically take like a paperback, hit this paperback. So you get like the big splash with balloon popping with some other hit with then adding some kick and put like some low end under, beat them up. Then what I do after, I'm turning off the original recording, and I have completely brand new gun, what sounds like straight in your face, like sounds in the movie,
Wow.
But it's never counts. So basically, this is what I keep as a reference. And sometimes I bring this thing, so because usually I have like multiple shots of this gun, so that when I keep the original file of the gun over the stuff what I reproduce with different stuff, it's just adding like a nice natural flavor of the sound to this thing. But most of the stuff is like this is how I do guns, for me.
But you actually start by going to like
always,
a shooting range.
Always. No matter what I do, I always going and do reference. Example, like if I'm working on Sound of the Monsters, like something, I can go to the farm and I post actually videos how I'm recording like angry pigs. When you're waiting like 2 hours, they're hungry. Then you dropping them like pumpkin and they're all like jumping and they're squeaking the noises. And you're recording, so I have the reference, then I bring down and I overstack, pitch them down, another level, at the like low end and the bottom, whatever compression, spread them. And next thing you get a freaking monster. And that was just a hungry pig eating, pumpkin, example.
Not so scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of videos like this I post on my Instagram. So you, Patrick, you probably see this thing.
I've seen all of them, man. I've seen you like in your Instagram with cars literally dropping from the sky. I'm just like,
oh yeah, this is how you do. You know what I mean? Like you gotta get.
Yeah. Scott, is that at all different then in like the sound collection process for?
I do. I mean, so I have a slightly different approach. In that, let's talk about guns. So when I record guns for movies, I'm recording something to capture that specific gun per se. In movies, it's already predetermined perspective, and it's usually like you never really see your gun because it's not a first-person shooter. Number one. Number two, it's a different approach to weapons. Now, when I record weapons for games, I have to record under the concept that my enemy can run up on me. So what I do is I put microphones probably about 100 yards out. So then all of a sudden I can hear distant. And so what I do is when I'm doing games, I'll crossfade between the different Z coordinates to be able to hear the different weapons at different distances. Number one. Number two, I really, as important, it's kind of like everything I think of as music in sound design. So to get a good drum sound, you need a good drum room. To get a good gunshot, you need a good ambience to how the echo is going to work, how like the gun report,
Yep.
or not. So there's ones around LA I like and I don't like. So it's taken me a career to kind of understand what places I like for different purposes throughout the process. Then I go out and I'm using 20, 30 mics. I mean, I've got mics around the mechanism of the gun because a lot of times I'm doing projects that require a lot of different types of guns. And a lot of people, if it's an Eagle, a Desert Eagle, or if it's an Uzi, or if it's, want to hear the mechanism. A lot of times I do, similar to Robert, embellish, but I need to capture that sound that people sort of know. What's the difference between an AK-47 and M16? Some of the pistols get very similar. Like the Desert Eagle I've used as a rifle because it doesn't sound like a pistol. It's badass. Same thing with larger weapons. Trying to get the machine guns if I'm doing an M60 or something that you're used to hearing it sound a certain way but doesn't. So in games, I actually have a slightly different approach. For Pacific Rim, Guillermo came to me and said I needed to be a 25-story robot. And I went, okay. So I had this crazy idea to find these 80-foot cargo containers. And I thought, all right, I'm going to hit it. with a sledgehammer. So I'm figuring, what am I doing? I'm using RE20s. I'm using 5-channel mics. I'm using my whole drum array, 421s, 57s, as well as, CSS5s and 191s and the whole, plethora. So I'm hitting this with a sledgehammer, and it's just not doing what I thought. So I said, well, is there a way I can destroy one of these things? And they went, no, because I was in Long Beach, but we can drop it.
That's what I do.
Yeah, so we basically dropped it, and now I've got this giant pipe organ of 80-foot air wave coming at me. So we're all giggling like schoolgirls.
I would be
the
too.
biggest sound you've ever heard. Then we did one better. We took another one and dropped one on top of the other, and they're all using forklifts to do this. At one point, it got a little noisy in the harbor area, so they built us 3-story high wall to block out all the sound. And this guy's doing it. He's doing it like just that fast, just like, oh, here, let me do this. And he's stacking them 3 stories tall. So now we're surrounded by all of these cargo containers, and this is great. And it's a sound that was so big and explosive. So a lot of the footsteps, the punches, a lot of the big movements. And then I'll go back in with my bazillion tracks. And the reason is I know what works on guns and all the stuff, but then I don't know what may work better. So maybe I'll take a ribbon mic out. Maybe I'll try a mic I've never tried. So I would say 25% of the mics I use are, I don't know if this is going to work.
Gotcha.
But it might be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And recorders too. So like I have an FR2 that is this wonderful Fostix FR2 that's got a wonderful limiter on it. So when I record NASCARs, things that are crazy loud through a solid state drive, it just got ballsier than anything I have. I have 788s and 744s, and I have lots of recorders. So when I go out, I'm kind of shotgunning. I don't know what's going to be great. Am I going to grab a Cascade fat mic, which is kind of neat? Am I going to do the Sennheiser 100K mic? They're all colors to me. Then I go back in, I sync them all together, make sure they're all kind of phase aligned, kind of like a drum set. And then I start picking and choosing what I like. But what's great though is, as in different parts of the game, different perspectives of the player, I can choose different mics to get the sound of a distance. So when we're shooting guns, I have a whole array of mics out where the bullets hit, so getting bullet buys. And there's times where you hear, and then we're listening, we're like, I think I just lost the mic.
We just bought that.
And things we would do, like great bullet buys, are actually from muskets. And then what you do is you grab the cylinders and you carve them up. You drill holes in them, you slash them, because they twirl. And when they twirl, they whistle at different frequencies.
Yeah.
So then I did that back all the way in a movie called Glory. And trying to get and all of a sudden it's really great. And they whistle and they have all these great, and the lower the gunpowder, actually the better the sound. So if they go supersonic, it doesn't sound like much.
So you have to learn a decent bit about the mechanism that you're using to actually capture the appropriate sound.
Yeah, and you get a lot of great, to be honest, I wish I was the expert in everything. You get these great gunsmiths who come in and they load it with lower gunpowder. And they said, let's try that. So it's 30 years of let's try that.
Gotcha. But for situations where you're dropping giant crates, it feels like you only have maybe a couple tries. So how do you go about okay, I need to set up this mic here to make sure I'm capturing every possible
we
sound.
don't know. So when I did Congo, we went to a quarry and dropped a giant boulder. And we were we thought this thing was going to explode and all these things. And we sent it up 10 stories up on this giant crane. And then we dropped it. And we're hiding behind things and we're doing all that stuff. And you think, this is going to be the most amazing sound you ever heard. And it goes, they drop it, it goes, boop. Oh, it did. It buried itself about 5 feet in the ground and it just went, boop. That's all it did.
I give you a good tip. If you want to get good bangs, when you go to the junkyard, ask them to drop you a propane tank.
Oh,
The
that's good.
commercials. I
Does it
went even
explode?
when I was recording lately, and they pick up like the commercial empty giant propane tank,
Oh yeah.
and they drop on top each other, and they're starting bouncing. This thing is loud, and if you get lucky, if the break, it's massive. And another thing, ask them to pick up like a 18-wheeler truck, like the tires, take with the claw, and make
Yeah.
them squeeze them in the air, so the braking.
Wow.
It explodes like huge cannon, like it's enormous sound.
And
I
you-
would just,
Like
It's
you ever
amazing how
drive
many
in the
people-
highway and sometimes you hear like a tire explode, you know what I mean? And you hear this like miles away where the tire explode in the truck. Same thing if you go to the junkyard, they're just gonna pick up the 18-wheel tires. You know, they have plenty of them always. And
it's
just
always fun with
squeeze
these
them
guys.
in the
They
air.
love to work with you guys, work with people if it's weird.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, Robert, you were talking about animals, and it's interesting. I've learned. So I've been hired a lot because I do a lot of creatures. They wanted me to record horses for Spirit, DreamWorks a long time ago, and to get the vocabulary, we realized animals actually don't really make sounds unless they're scared,
Oh, they're hungry.
and then they squeal. So
Mhm.
the question, became through a career, how do you get animals? And I've recorded pretty much everything. What we found is there's a handful of ways. Some are, I don't, I haven't gone to a place where they kill the animals. That's something I'm not going to do. But I've had recordings of it. But the best way to do it is a couple things. Food is the easiest one. So I recorded Bengal tigers a lot. You bring a big tri-tip around, and you can't do it with the trainer. The trainer won't do it. They get some guy who like nobody cares about because it really pisses off the animals. And then you walk around the cage with food, and you drop it in, but you don't drop it in. And the Bengal tigers get really pissed off at you, and they start striking the cage and just vocalizing. That's number one. Number two is sex. I've recorded elephants this way. So if you have, it works two different ways. If you bring a female in heat to a bunch of males of any species, elephants, horses, they all will start vocalizing, and they're like, hey, look at me, and so they all just start going through the vocabulary. I did it with a bunch of elephants. I was with three ladies, and then they brought the male in. Now, the thing is, elephants are really, really large, and I am not. So, then they take their they take their trunks and they feel you out, and they feel my head and feel your butt, and they kind of feel you up a little bit. And then the moment the male comes in, they don't care. So now you've got these very large moving animals, and you're inside that little sphere. So it gets a little. You got to keep your wits about you. You can get hurt.
Yeah,
That's a little freaky.
that's a little freaky.
Yeah.
And then the last one, which I do only occasionally, is we did it for Spirit and we did it for a camel. You grab one of the young'uns
Mhm.
and you take it out away from the mother or the pack. And that kind of freaks them out as well, but you kind of keep them, you don't want to hurt the animals. So you keep a line of sight, but they don't really love that one has been isolated alone. So, like for the horses, I wanted to try to record horses naturally. So I saw a video of a bunch of opera singers. So what I did was I put microphones on their heads, like they do opera singers, radio mics. So I radioed up 10 different horses, sat in a van, like very CIA-ish, and recorded their normal interactions. And then we took the baby away, and then all the ants came by to try to make the mother less angry. But you got to be careful when you do that. We did it with a camel, and camels kick.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
So we saw the guy yelled and said the camel just got loose, the male alpha camel.
Mhm.
And so me and another guy, we had to dive in the bushes.
Yeah, you could break a bone like that. Jeez.
Oh, it'll kill. They said it'll kill you if they hit you in the chest. Gone. So
Who
it's
knew
fun.
that a sound
You know,
design
it's
gig
great.
would be
it's the most dangerous.
such high
thing.
risk?
Yeah, it's easier making.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's like a photographer,
Yeah.
audio photographers trying to get the coolest, hardest to get sounds.
Yeah.
You know,
I
But
mean, that's
I
it.
really want to be. I want to be in the conversation where you're explaining to the studio why you have to drop a propane tank on top of like a 6-story building, and they're like, "It's a rom-com. What are you doing that for?" we need it. We need the sound.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the differences in music composition for these things.
Mhm.
And and I also want to ask, like, how often is it that you would get hired for, and Tom and Jacob, you could maybe speak to this too, for a composition gig that you then end up doing a little bit of like sound design elements, maybe, I don't know, is that something that typically happens where they're like, can you give us like some menu sounds or like, other in-game elements?
Jacob?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know about you, Tom, but I've not really gone too much into the sound design arena. I do know that games really want kind of novel sounding orchestrations and using, instruments that are kind of unique. And so I do know that in working on the games that I have, coming up with something that is a little bit unique is been really kind of it's been asked for explicitly, and they really love to kind of break the mold as much as they can each time out. Is how I've experienced it. And yeah, I mean, it's similar to other scoring gigs. The time frames are a lot longer in my experience. They kind of, the production of a game will go for 6 months or a year or whatever, whereas a TV episode will be like a week turnaround or something crazy. But the amount of music for a game is really I mean, it's always been kind of a wonderful thing to be a part of, because it's usually a very expansive world, and it's usually there are many different looks at a storyline, and kind of really stretching out a character's kind of development, and because some, depending on the game, you might have certain storylines diverge from this one point, and kind of getting coverage over where the game takes you is kind of an interesting and unique part of scoring games, I think.
So I want to give Tom a chance to answer this as well, but Jacob, just really quick on what you said there. Is that mostly manifested in, you think, like the themes and like motifs in the music that represent like that character or like a certain mood?
Yeah, I mean, it's been sometimes motif driven, sometimes it's been driven by color. So for like the Gears of War Judgment game, they wanted to create very disparate kind of, like, there was this new part of the Gears of War franchise that was very electronic, and then there was like the harkening back to kind of Gears of War of old, in that they wanted to have an orchestral component be very front and center. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of telling the story using a group of instruments. It was kind of like the main crux of that one, and I thought it was effective. It was cool.
Yeah.
So Tom, has that also happened in your experience, where you get like hired for composition, but then you end up doing sound design for the game as well?
I'd say 99% of the time, when I'm hired, the clients that hire me know what I mainly do, so they'll hire me for music. There have been times where I've been approached to say, hey, can you handle the sound design too? That's usually with more independent, smaller outfits, and I'll say absolutely yes, because I know plenty of amazing sound designers, just like people like Robert and Scott. And I can subcontract, and I have a sense of sound, and I I understand it. It's just that I don't go to junkyards and drop propane tanks, and that's not what I'm here doing my own thing with music. So when it's pure sound design, meaning here's some gunshots, here's some explosions, here's some footsteps, very rarely, usually for the smaller projects. But also, one of the things that I enjoy doing and I get asked to do a lot is in the music that I create, as part of the ambience, I will add part of that environment into it. And I make sure I am respectful of the fact that there is sound design in there, so I'm not here to just like replace everything, because then it's baked into the music as opposed to on when you walk by the water, or when But I do, one of the things that I love about music is that I like it to take you somewhere. So I like to know that if we're in a dark, dank sewer, I don't just want to use instruments. I sometimes want to imply that we're in the dark, dank sewer, and so I'll use instruments that will have characteristics of that, or sometimes, like I remember in I'm saying dark dank sewer, so Prince of Persia, there was literally a dark dank sewer, and I remember one of the instruments I brought in is the guy made this custom instrument which has water. He had water in the instrument. It was like this custom made thing, and
I was gonna say, what's that called? But it was something that he made.
It was custom made, but he would like do the thing. It was almost like one of those African metal where you pluck it, but it would, and it was like this cool. It was like this watery thing. So I always love bringing the atmosphere into the music. I love the music itself to take you away and put you in the environment, up to the point where it does not interfere or confuse the player as to what's going on and where that sound's coming from.
Gotcha. To follow up with that point, though, like, how early into the game development are you guys actually involved in the music aspect of it? Because it feels like the music aspect of it is really setting the mood for the scenes of the game. So are you playing the game as they're developing it? They're giving you like developer versions of the game, and then you're writing the music for that. Do you have control over that, or is that mostly like them giving you a scene to write to?
Yeah. Jacob, why don't you?
Oh, well, I was going to say Tom has a lot more experience than I do. But from the things that I've worked on, it's been usually kind of halfway down production, and you're getting playouts of gameplay kind of as, or if you're lucky enough to be involved earlier than that, they send you over kind of their art Bible or whatever, where you kind of have drawings and stuff to just get. It's super important to kind of color and light and shade. It all kind of influences how you think about the subject, and so having those drawings, having those QuickTime videos is just tremendously helpful. But yeah, it's I've not started a game on day one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. For me, it's been all over the map. I've worked on games. Some of my contemporaries have worked on games I know for like 2 years. They were like in there right at the beginning. I'd say the majority of my involvement comes in the last quarter of the game development. And, so maybe the last couple of months. Sometimes it's been as short as a few weeks. It's all over the map. It depends on the developer and the game itself. It's pretty funny. I kind of do enjoy being involved earlier, and there are a lot of advantages to that, particularly for I guess for everyone, but a lot of times the teams themselves like it because they have the music, and the music informs a lot of times the mood, and they're like, oh, we love listening to this, and it really melds together. Sometimes it comes very late in the game, and that's okay too, but you have to doing what we do, we kind of have to just adapt to each situation. So there's no one set way that it happens. Sometimes you're involved 2 years right from the beginning. I'm the guy they call like the last minute, quick, we need,
Oh man,
Yeah.
is there such a thing as like temp music in this kind of gig? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I will encourage that. Now, we know what temp music is in the movie industry. They'll place it to the picture, and it's like they score it with someone else's music, and then you come in and replace it.
Mm-hmm.
In games, it's not like that because we're not scoring moment to moment. We're scoring to the action of playing the game. So it's more like, well, here's a reference track that kind of works, or we like the drums in this, but we like the atmosphere in this, or we like the energy in this, or we like the darkness of, whatever it is. So when it comes to music, as Frank Zappa likes to say, it's trying to talk about music is like trying to dance about literature. I kind of like having reference music, but then an explanation. What is it that this is doing? So play me this piece. It's like, okay, what do you feel is intense? What do you feel is rock? What do you feel is late 60s music? What do you feel it like? You say a term, but it can be very relative. So give me an example musically and then describe it. And then what I can say is, that's what they consider XYZ, and that's what they consider this. So then I kind of hear the music aspect of it. I'm like, okay, boom, boom, boom. Then I can synthesize it together. But it's so the communication is a big part of it, and that's one of the things I like. But I've learned the hard way that unless you really listen and talk about music and listen and talk about what you're listening to and describe it, it's very difficult to get on the same page.
So you're talking about like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to throw in also because I also do a lot of mixing, especially in games. So it's interesting. I'm on the receiving end of everybody's material. So what I like to do when you're asking about where it is in production, I actually like to think of everything backwards rather than forwards. A lot of people, including sound designers and people, they build up to something. The problem with that is most instincts are go big, interesting early on. I like to identify those areas. I don't care if it's a film or a game. Game is harder because you don't have mixing in theory the same you do in linear. So I think what I like to do is I like to what I call pre-post, or I'm sorry, pre-production.
Right.
Because actually I'm not post, I'm production in gaming. I'm not, when you do sound design, it's part of creating assets that go into post.
Yeah.
So I always like to pre. So what are we doing? So let's say we're doing a magical fantasy thing. Who's doing the wind chimes? Who's doing the, who's showing magic? Is it music? Is it effects? There's a lot of areas. So there's sound effects and there's thematic music. And then there's everything in the middle. Thematic music has something you can hum. But a lot of times the composer's trying to create an ambiance. A sound designer is trying to create an ambiance. If we are doing weapons, are you going to have drums? Are you going to be doing percussion going, or is the drum, or is the weapons going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
How many times has it clashed? So I'm on the receiving side of going, oh shit, wait a minute. Now all of a sudden I can't tell the difference between the percussion and the weapons.
Right.
So it's always good to kind of create a roadmap. And I've done this with almost all the movies and a lot of the games that I work on. We try to have a meeting and understand, what does the client want? What is the scene? Is it active? Is it not? Is it story driven? So like in a game, it's a lot of story underscore. Okay, great. Sound effects, I got crickets, or I got a drone for a cave or some drips. So I'm not going to carry the emotional element, but that's really where the score needs to go. Let's say we're doing something that has multiplayer and it's full tilt boogie, but the music needs to sit back because now it's all about strategy, especially if you're doing esports. So you have to look at each genre and approach it uniquely as what does that game want? What does the scene want? What is that section of the game? How's it going to go together? And if we can get 80, 90% closer to figuring out, it's a tango, it's a dance. I'm going to step this way, you step that way. And we're going to have, and then I like things in stems. So I could sit there and say, there's the melody, there's the rhythm, here's the ear candy. Because it might be that I don't want to lose the intensity of and the thickness of the strings. I've got a solo instrument that may or may not come up and down because there might be somebody talking, and it's interactive, so you don't know, you're not scoring for that, but I can control that. And then there's the ear candy, which is really kind of cool, unless it's now clashing. So a lot of times when you can't write to something that you know, because it's interactive, and the music also becomes interactive music.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, building them out in musical stems gives a lot of flexibility to the mix, as well as creating. It's almost like when we used to use old sequencers. You had to do patterns, and then you can. It's almost what Ableton is now. You're creating these little music sections that can get put together based on the interaction and the player. That's very different than linear.
Right.
Yeah.
And Scott raises a very important point. And I often do not have the luxury of having someone as skilled as Scott on the other side as far as doing the mixing to deliver stems. I'm usually asked to do the stems. So what I always do is I will prioritize the sound effects. So even if they don't offer it to me, I said, please, please, please give me footage or capture with sound effects, not without.
I remember you playing me the tracks, yeah.
With the guns, I need to hear, give me the most intense, dense, sound effect driven area of the game. And if they don't have that, usually they do, but if they don't, then I'll go out on my own and I'll figure out, okay, the franchise sounds like this, or I'll say, hey, just give me this. If you don't have it in the game yet, just give me the sound effects. I remember I did that in one of the Halo games, and just give me the sound effects, and I'll make my own, like, and I make a track of that. And it's amazing how much that informs the way I'll write the music or arrange it. Because otherwise I am tempted to, because I come from a record, background where it's like, to the whole spectrum. I am tempted to fill in and but it's amazing. Sometimes the most effective thing is when there's nothing in the low end. And if you really pay close attention to some of the most amazing scores, even someone as traditional as John Williams, it's like in some of the most intense scenes, the music is just all up here. It's not down there. It's like, wow, and it works great. So I always prioritize sound effects and dialogue, and I know that the music is the least important or the last thing that goes in, and I use that to my advantage, because if I stay away from it and if I encompass it, the music's going to be louder and everyone's going to be happy. Otherwise, guess what? Guess who loses? The music. They bring it way down, right? Mm-hmm. And that's if I can't deliver stems, which in my case usually is the case. I have to give the mixes.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, go ahead, Robert.
Same thing like when I do, like, example, like in Daspi, like working for the trailer stuff, like example, there was the last one, the Green Hunt, I think so, Tom Hanks, the one's opening. And that's the thing, like when I was working on the track, I have to remember, there's going to be dialogue of the actor on top. They're going to be sound effects, what they're going to add. They're going to be some rhythms going. So basically, it's like when I'm making a position, I got to keep so much space. And I wish I would have sometimes music, but I have to come with these ideas to come, support, give them inspiration to edit everything, but give them a lot of space. Because if I would just load everything with sound design, with everything in the one track, with one stems, there's no way they can figure out everything. And sometimes, they just pick up part of the drum here, riser here, that's a dive, drop here. There's some aggression drums going because he's helping the editors going. So exactly what Scott's doing, editing with the stems, this thing, because there's so many things what's going on after, because I did one track and they're using, it doesn't mean it's gonna work everything, because sometimes it's too much, so you gotta give them the space. And you guys probably all find out that less is sometimes more when you give them. Instead, like going focus like in the crazy composition, notes and chords playing, nobody cares. All you have to do is just support the picture. You know what I mean? And if you're gonna drag too much away attention, what's going on the screen for people, that's not good,
Right.
And you mentioned like music, and I don't know. So I don't differentiate between music and effects. To me, it's all soundtrack, and I'm always find parallels, guns or drums, all sorts of things. So another thing I've been like, as you can see, I play guitar.
They have a lot of same frequency, and they will be fighting.
It is. So one of the things they talk about, especially in some of the metal guitars, because I like it all, is getting rid of the low end, because that's where the bass guitar is. Because when you first play guitar, you're like, I want to move the room, and I hit the guitar, and it's really great. But then you hear all these great guitar players going, yeah, you know what? It's too flabby. I got to tighten it up because now the bass is going to be there. So it's the same as an orchestra. We're just sound design and sound effects and even dialogue is another instrument of the orchestra. And what I have found when recording bands, when I used to do a lot of, records and recording, the guys that, they would say, oh my God, your mix is amazing. I'd be like, oh, thank you. But the reality is the arrangement was great because now the composer or the arranger, somebody figured out what plays well together and allows what instruments, so they're not clashing, then allows me as a mixer to be able to take that even to a greater length. But a lot of it is the way it's arranged and thought out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that and to echo what Tom said earlier, having, an effects track up and dialogue track up while you're writing is just the way forward, because a lot of choices that you think are available to you, all of a sudden you realize, no, there's just no room for this. This isn't something I need to worry about because it's covered in this other area, and whatever music I'm writing is gonna complement that if I stay away from the thing that it's doing. So it's definitely over time something that I've picked up with experience to kind of lay low and just like pick your spots to speak.
Yeah.
So you guys are kind of talking about like the challenges of being a composer who's a member of a team that, that's just part of the experience. You're focusing on one part, and you might not even be the composer for the entire sequence of the game, right? In some cases. Jacob, we actually got a question directed at you from YouTube.
Okay.
I want to add to. So it was, you composed for the Blue Planet. What is your thought process while making themes for nature? And how is it different from composing themes for characters like we talked a little bit about earlier? And I also just want to add, in general, if you guys are composing for a series which has already been established, where there's already a theme that people recognize, and now you're put into that situation, how do you bring your compositional skills to that without detracting from what's already been established?
Right. Halo is like a good example of that.
Halo, Killer Instinct, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's great about those wildlife series is that at least the way that the team that did Planet Earth 2 and the team that did Blue Planet 2, the way that they wanted to convey those stories was in a way that kind of drew people in. There's a lot of like traditional wisdom about doing documentaries is to kind of, for the music to remain somewhat impartial. You don't really, but in those two projects, it was kind of the antithesis of that. It was to heighten the experience, to immerse the audience, and I think that's very similar to games. Actually, I don't think I think at the end of the day, it's a kind of multimedia experience, and if you're kind of delivering an experience that captivates a listener or a viewer or someone that's actually playing the thing, then you're winning. And so I don't know that I differentiate approach necessarily. I will say to your other question though, that it's a bit tricky when you inherit a franchise and you really want to be respectful of what music has come before it. And oftentimes that means, unless there's a direct request, you kind of stay away from that turf because unless like I said, unless they say, well, we want to pay homage to the legacy of this character development, and the old theme really works well here. I typically try and veer the other way if I'm being honest, just out of respect for kind of what's come before. I don't want to do what someone else is doing.
Mm-hmm. Tom?
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a fantastic question. And I've been in both situations. I've been in the situation where I've started and created the signature sound for a brand new franchise. And then I've been in situations where I've had this intimidating task to step into an established sound that no one had any desire to change. So Halo is a fantastic example of that. Killer Instinct was another great example of that. And so the approach really that the way I see sound is I always refer to it as like a musical recipe. From when I was in high school, I used to dissect the music, like pop music and stuff on the radio, or my favorite albums at the time, and I would try to dissect it and recreate it with my meager synthesizers and whatever I had. And it became an exercise in critical listening, to listen to every nuance. So it becomes a musical recipe. So in the case of, where I have to step in and pick up so that no one's like, wow, was that the original composer? Is that, when they want it to feel like it's that, then I'll kind of identify it. I'll break it down like an explosion diagram, and like, okay, so what makes it sound like a Halo, track? And Marty and Michael loved. I mean, they were huge inspiration for me to even get into video games. So I would in my own mind, I'd be like, okay, well, I see the voicings that I love, the suspensions that he uses. Okay, a lot of sacred choral. There's some. Like a rock, there's a lot of tribalness, there's Celtic, and I would kind of find these colors, these recipes, and if I put those same ingredients in, I find that I'm able to really kind of come close to it. And, that's one thing I've kind of just grown up naturally getting good at recreating something. Like, I'm often completely different arena video games, but Just Dance. Where they'll sometimes not get the mechanicals and they want me to step in and recreate a song where you can't even tell that it's not the original recording. So I love doing it. They
get the license from the original artist or something, right?
They get the mechanicals, but they got the song. So, I did that for Britney Spears songs and recreating Max Martin. I'm like, oh my God, I'm spending an entire day on a hi-hat. I have a huge respect for that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's the way I'll treat it with anything I do. With Mick Gordon stuff, with Killer Instinct, and kind of step in and try to, okay, so what makes it that? What do they want to keep, and then what don't they want to keep? Because that's also a situation. It's like, no, we don't want you to just clone somebody. We want it to, like, this is what makes it that franchise, but then go ahead and interpret it. So, and then there's also ways of coming up with your own signature sound. And again, for me, I put as much time as they allow me into what I call the R&D phase. And which is just experimentation and finding like, oh, what unique things can define it. And I try to set those borders really early. I try to set limitations, like, and I keep thinking of Prince of Persia back, which is many years ago, but it's a good example because it had very stringent borders. Like we said, okay, no, you know what? No orchestral instruments, none, zero, which is very tempting. It's like, of course, it's very easy. But when you limit yourself, I find you get way more creative. When you give yourself less crayons to color with, you can get to drawing a lot faster. And so...
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, that's the way I kind of see it. So I'm everywhere in the spectrum, from, completely original signature sound to a fusion to a clone. And I remember there's a lot of talk like with the Halos, like, wow, that sounds like I thought Marty and a lot of fans didn't even like that they kind of went off from that sound for a while there. And then he started bringing it back. There was a lot of controversy and I didn't want to get involved in that. I was just, I was just very honored to get feedback like, wow, you know, that you captured the essence. Or, you know, I when I listen, I can close my eyes and within 5 seconds I know that it's an XYZ game. You know, that's for me, that's success. Like, what's the signature sound? And that's hard, right? How much music is there out there? I mean, my goodness. So a
few
signature
songs,
sound
yeah.
is like, wait a second. You want a signature sound on top of good music? Okay.
Right.
You know,
Everyone wants to be like the unique, the signature sounds. Every single person, you know. And
how many freaking signatures are there?
Only got
But I
12
mean,
notes.
that's the holy grail, right?
But you know what, Tom? You make a good point because we talk about this when we met. Then the less tool we have, the faster we're working.
Yes.
Like
Yes,
example,
right,
like I'm
right.
working right now for like new project for the Steinberg, and I say, okay, I only working with this 100 sounds.
Right.
And what I can do with these sounds, I don't want anything else.
Right.
And I'm just pushing myself to the limits, discover so many other tools, what I can do with this thing, and I work
Right.
faster because that's my bank.
Boom. That's it. You set your
And you
limits.
work way faster.
Oh.
You know what you have, and you know,
Yeah.
like after 1 week working on this, and the 100 sounds become right now almost like a 5,000 elements. When I combine and mix them, you probably know, Scott, how it works. You know, you can make so much stuff of these things.
Yeah.
And
That's
like when I play games too, like there's more than just one multiple signature sound within that game. So I can remember the fighting sound, the fighting soundtrack for Skyrim. I can remember the just town sound. There's all these signature sounds where if I like hum it to my friends, they'll be like, "Oh, got shot in the knee with an arrow in Oblivion, didn't you?" And like it just keeps it. So that's so much respect. But kind of like piggybacking off that, something that I really admire with video game sound and composition is that I could put in, and I've literally put in like 400 hours into a video game, or like 300 hours onto another video game, and the music never misses a beat. Like for me, the cue is, oh man, the music's getting intense. There's an enemy somewhere. And the music transitions perfectly from those two things. If I'm playing Spider-Man, as soon as I swing up on the air, orchestral, right away, transitioning perfectly from what I was just doing. So when you're composing for music for video games, do you keep that in mind? Like where you're like, okay, I have to transition to here anytime the player moves into this spot because they're in control. It's not like a movie where it's linear. Like, how do you keep
And
that?
I also want to know, like, do you guys have a role in the actual implementation of those sounds into the game where you have to have a basic working knowledge of like the Wise engine or whatever it is that you're using to say, okay, you know, this musical cue lives here, and you're actually testing that out or, you know, assigning it to a tester? Like, how does that workflow manifest?
Yeah. Jacob, you want to start? Or?
Yeah.
I'm putting you in the spot. I just don't want to monopolize
No,
it.
you're too gracious, Tom. So yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I know I've read, like, man, when I first got into LA, I read all these books about being a video game composer, and there are all these guys that like were like part of the audio department in these game companies, and were implementing everything that they wrote. And I tip my hat to them, but I definitely can't do that. And my experience has been that the developers will say, we have kind of a list of requests of what we're thinking should happen musically in you know, this stretch of the game, and there kind of this range of emotions that could be experienced.
So they hand you like a basic spec sheet for something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it will be, yeah, it will be like, this is what's happening at this point, and this is we'd like a 2-minute loopable thing that checks off the following emotions, and then at that point it's just an iterative process in terms of making sure that they're happy when they implement it, and you know, adjusting things if it's not working when they implement it.
Right. Yeah. Very similar. It's very similar in my case. I mean, the more experienced, bigger developers that you work with, generally speaking, they understand what's going to work and what's not going to work, and they'll give you guidance. and if they know your experience, they don't waste time explaining the ABCs of it. But generally speaking, I've learned the hard way all the pitfalls that can happen. And so if they say to me, okay, we want a 2-minute tension, we want a 60-second combat, we need a combat ending back to the tension, or we need a combat ending that they'll describe all the pieces they need. Then if they hadn't already explained it, I will ask ad nauseum, okay, so let me get this straight. What can possibly happen? Can we go from this to this? It's basically like a flow chart. And I want to make sure I understand exactly all the possibilities. So Killer Instinct was a really good example also, because it's a fighting game. So everything is very reactive. It's like to the second reactive. And so basically the strategy is, I want to know all the possibilities. You have to explain that to me, the composer, and then it's my job to figure out solve the puzzle so that when I give it back to you, it will accomplish what you need to be done. So the easiest way to do that, for example, is to keep everything in the same key and do everything at the same tempo. But how interesting is that always? Right. For a fighting game, actually, that can kind of work, but sometimes it's fine to good modulation. So jumping to sum it all up, what I will do is when I'm composing, I understand all the possibilities, and then I will preview it, even in, like, I use Logic, but you can any sequencer will do, and I will skip from the worst possible place in the tension to the beginning of the combat. I'm like, does that work? Does that work? Oh no, that doesn't work because I happened to sneak in, whatever, the melody, or so I will always try it out, and I will then critique it and skip cycle from one area to another area. Can that work? Can that work? Can that work? So I'll test out that non-linear worst case scenario when I'm composing, or at least at some point during the composition, and then I will perhaps, even in the file names themselves, will come up with strategies. Hey, developer, is it possible to do a pre-trigger, so we layer the beginning of the intro, can I give you like a 1-bar overlay or a pre-trigger, whatever you want to call it, so that it plays this swell before the downbeat? And they're like, yeah, we can do that, because we can afford to use 4 stereo voices or 6 stereo voices. So I'll use that to my advantage when I'll give it to them, as opposed to a hard cut between the end of something and the beginning of something else. So I'll figure out all those pieces, and then I'll give them the pieces, and in the file names themselves, I'll say, tempo, pre-trigger 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats, the length, so that if there's a tail, and like all these different variables. So there's a lot of left brain stuff and right brain at the same time, and that's one thing that makes video game music very unique, I think, to other forms of music, because there's a lot of thought and strategy that goes into it.
And just to give everybody a little bit of background, who's watching, Killer Instinct is probably like would you say that's like one of the most extreme cases of that? Because that was a game where when you're in the middle of a combo, that's when the music would change. As soon as you do like a combo breaker or like whatever, in the middle of that fight, the music changes, and then a couple seconds later, if they separate or whatever the players, then it goes back to normal.
Moment to moment, right? You can't wait a few seconds to switch states. You have to actually boom. So
that's crazy.
So there were some very interesting, but yet simple strategies to accomplish that. So that's always the goal. I'm like, what's the simplest solution? What's the least we can do to address it?
Right.
I think the high energy games, though, I think what's always difficult is my heart goes out to the sound guys in the departments, because they're also answering to the game developer and the game designers. So a lot of times they hear the music out of context and they go, oh my God, amp it up. It's got to be just, and then, oh, weapons, everything's like on 11.
Yeah.
And then they combine it. So I did I mixed all the in-game sounds for the last Doom, and then the Doom before that.
Oh, dude.
Awesome.
The
So
hours
a
I
lot of
spent.
it was we had think of it as 3 different pieces. We had, instead of there being the dialogue, you had the creature vocals. You had thick guitars, just thrashing.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, you still needed the weapons to cut through in a way that gave you some form of feedback and an emotional, yes, I've got this new weapon that's going to be badass and just really cool. Everything's kind of turned to 11.
Yeah, it's like over like post metal, right? Just like
Absolutely. So then you start getting into multi-band dipping and ways to be able, like, how do I?
oh man,
And the guitars are the hardest because
yeah,
you get 6, 7 tracks of guitars, and it's just this wall of sound in the mid range, and it's just it's and you're like, how do? So they brought that. It took me with the guys about a day to just figure out how to approach this. Because I listened to all of that and then heard all the creatures, and I went, are the creatures panning? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, huh. So then this it was just thick. It's basically looking like a giant thing of string, or as we all know, audio cables. They just all got knotted up, and then you got to take each one and unstring it. And the guys over there were fantastic, and I've worked with them in the past. But so we had to kind of understand. You can't go higher. You can't make anything louder. We're already there in digital. There's just nowhere to go. Now we got to go down. But how do we go down? So literally, I would go through and master all the music, all the creatures, all the weapons, and that would take me days to just carve out. I'd hear 500 hertz, 280 hertz, and I'm literally putting what I would call divots in so much of the audio, knowing how each, it's like creating a puzzle and having to carve out the pieces they fit together.
Yeah.
So a lot of me, when I don't add much, I take away. So when I'm mixing, it's all about subtractive everything, getting rid of things. Like, what's that? And there's something in gaming that's different than anything else, is just think of voice counts. Well, there might be 20 creatures, but do I need to hear 20 creatures? Maybe I only want to hear 3 creatures. But then as I turn, those 3 keep changing, even though I know I'm getting pummeled by a lot of creatures. So I even when I did Lost Planet, we had this one creature that had like 20 legs. I'm like, give me a 3 or 4. We tried the 20 because it's all physics-based engine, and you're like, that's just mud. Oh, and but you got to put music on there, so now we can't hear the music. We can't hear anything. So now it's all about taking things out, and that's where I think what I find the difference between, I'm going to say, younger composers and composers that have been around. They understand how to create air for the most part. Like, if I could fill it up easy, which you would do on an album. But when you're doing film, games, anything else, you gotta again, you're creating an orchestra. You got to hear the other parts, and that's where the guys are saying, give me those other parts to understand it. But a lot of times, I think 2 things happen: is the in-house audio guy doesn't have the power or control to sway the game designers. The game designers want that emotional up. Then they put it together, and of course, all that comes together 2 weeks before release, 1 week before release, and then they
That's
go.
why they have massive update the day when you buy the game. First thing you load the game.
Absolutely, they go.
That's it. My son always going, okay, it's gonna download like 2 hours right now. Update.
You're like, but you have the game. What's the?
First thing you play the game, that's an update.
When we grew up, we had a cartridge. We snapped it in, and you play the damn thing.
Oh yeah,
Not anymore.
Dude, so like for newer games, like there's 2 discs. Like, I mean, even this morning when I got The Last of Us 2, there's an install disc and then there's a play disc with more gigs in the play disc that you got to download before you can play. It's a big game, man. These are big things.
Yeah.
Scott, someone have to come with the idea how they're gonna implement like a docking station inside. So you're gonna have like a compressor, chain compression. When the gun comes, it's cutting off the frequency of the low bass, so you can hear the gun, explosion, the cutting bass from the music.
Well, that's right. I've been trying to work on
Just
it.
like we do like in the mixing music, one cutting, but
Yeah, like I want an AI program, and I've been talking to a lot of game developers. So one of the things I can do in linear formats I can't do in game as easily let's just say I'm at a point that I'm out of ammo and I'm going to die. But I don't want to be that on the nose because I don't know when it's going to happen. There's ways I want to totally change the mix. Now, I may not even know that I'm going to die, other than because I haven't figured it out yet. But just realizing that the trajectory of where I'm going isn't going to be a good outcome. Well, in a film, I would drop the effects, go surreal, bring the music up, change the cue, and all of a sudden go, oh shit, we're taking me there. You know, the last fight, in Glory, where they're charging the hill at the end, and there's that great, cue there. There's so many great things we can do in games in that way. And I think that I just, it's all about integration. When do we take things out?
Right.
That's not predetermined. And that's sometimes it's predetermined, we can do that, but sometimes you don't. It's all interactive, so you don't know when that's going to be, when to create tension. So now it becomes about phrasing emotional arcs within music and sound effects and understanding how I want to remix it from that standpoint. Sometimes I want the music to go down, it's in the way. Sometimes I want the sound effects to go out because there's no emotion to it. And again, we've been hearing the gameplay. Now I want that emotional cue to kick in to take me somewhere, emotionally.
So, guys, we only have time for one more question here, but you're talking about new tech, Scott, and I just kind of, I want to take that theme and just finish up here with asking if you guys have any tips for somebody who is looking to get into the video game world, who is a composer or a sound designer, and has the landscape of the industry, do you think, changed, right? So is this like now different if somebody wants to get into it now than it used to be? And what would you suggest to that person?
Like, Tom, it's like the same strategy that you did with creating your music, and just was like, okay, this is like me gonna create my music, I'm gonna release it, and then they might license it, and you took a leap of faith. Is that still applicable today, you think?
It is. It's one way. You're referring to the Atlas Plug album that I did in 2003. It's always great when you can say, this is who I am, and you like it or you don't like it, and if you want me, I'm around. I mean, that's ideal for a creative person, right? That doesn't always work out that way. A lot of times we have to establish ourselves by stepping in and being able to emulate someone else or another style. So yeah, it's always applicable to do that. But if you really want the best chance, I think you have to do a little bit of everything. I think everyone probably agree. You have to be able, yes, do you have a unique identity? Yes, I do. But if you need me to sound like whatever is in the style now or whatever they're going for, yes, I can also do that. So, getting in the industry, really, probably the most important thing is being visible and developing relationships. That's about it. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, it's I imagine as someone who, graduated college in 2004 and wanted to get into games right out of college, I was like, it was a real daunting thing to try and circumvent, and the only way I came through it was really this way that I didn't anticipate, and it was forming relationships with composers that were further along than I was, and helping them out on projects, and then them being gracious enough and inviting me on to co-score things with them, and so it was it's a tricky one to navigate, and I don't know that it's necessarily the route that you expect. To echo what Tom's saying, I think it's really smart to kind of have some visibility, have put out something you feel best exemplifies what you think is interesting about the craft that you've signed up to do, and I think if it resonates with people, you'll be getting a call probably.
Right.
You know what? Like I have very similar situation like Tom. Like Tom have his CD. I have my demo CD when I approached the heavy acid guys. But since then, a lot of change. Now we have internet and people just can explode, show everything. So my advice would be to people, be generous. Don't ask first question, how much money are you going to make? And then people have to remember, business work by recommendations. So whatever you're going to put online, people to listen, make sure you're going to put the best work you can do at this moment, because you really don't know who's going to listen this, like who's going to watch this thing. And you might going to get message from some X1 and it's going to completely change your mind. But the moment when you're going to put something, hey, check my library or something like sounds, and you can buy this for this thing,
right,
it's a wrong approach. You know what I mean? Like, be generous. And if people ask you for help, help them. You know what I mean? Like, try collaborate with them in the project, and, you know, try breaking this industry. Like, I go to the name show 10 times, going to the different things, approach people. And, you know, luckily for me, what I did, you know, be generous to people, show people my videos, how I do what I do. I show people how I do. And this opened for me doors to every major company in the market. Like when I go in the name show, like every company know me right now because they see my videos, and it's easy. But that was me, works for me. Doesn't mean it's going to working for you, but that's a one way. Always, whatever you do, try do the best job you ever do, and just don't ask about money. Just try do for fun because you love to do. Because if you love to do, don't worry, things will happen. If you're doing it only for the money, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta do, you know, what's make you happy too. Because if we're not happy, what we're doing, you know, we're gonna call this thing job. You don't want to call job what we're doing, because we're lucky what we're doing. You know, we're getting paid for play. So why we want to change anything? You know what I mean? This is how I think. You know.
Yeah.
And I'll throw that into add. I mean, I think when you roll back to its beginnings, I do agree it's passion and it's knowledge. And what I mean by knowledge is, like, even Patrick was saying, oh my God, in this one game, and oh my God, in this game, and that. All of a sudden, if you're passionate about an industry, whether it's gaming, TV, film, if you could speak the language of creativity, and if you are creative, it starts here. You got to kind of hear it in your head. You know, if you're doing kind of a weird Looney Tunes thing, or, you know, every time I do a project, I have to think, how do I want to approach this? How do I want to deal with this? And the first thing, obviously, is passion. But if you have passion and you have knowledge, now you have a language that you can share with other people and get them excited because they're excited and you're excited. And now all of a sudden there's a connection. So when you go to an E3 and a NAMM show, there's something to talk about. Now all of a sudden they go, wow, you seem like a pretty bright guy or girl or whatever. And now all of a sudden a conversation, which means a relationship. And all of a sudden it's the beginnings of a career. And when you do that, it just snowballs.
Yep.
But you have to know the industry. And I totally agree. For everybody that I know who's made very good money, nobody tried to make money. And everybody that I know, because what happens is when you're young and you try to make money, that means banging out a lot of material really quickly. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you'll make money, but it won't be as much as you could make. And then there's the people that excel at it, who are really good at it, who are in demand because they're passionate and good and yada, yada. And next thing you know, they're making a pretty decent living. So that's how I feel in starting.
And living from something what they love to do. And that's the beauty.
You know, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm still at night, I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm watching how people are using technology. Oh my God, they did this approach, that approach. Gas canisters. I'm like, okay. So now all of a sudden, whether it's music, recording guitars, orchestras, it's all great knowledge. What mics did they use? You know, what kind of plugins? How do they manipulate stuff? What's the latest tech out there? How could I use it? Now all of a sudden you start getting it in your head. So when the gig comes up, you go, I should try this.
But this is what's called passion. You're passionate about everything what's attached to this thing.
Absolutely. Right. It's all about, you got to want to do this.
And you know, when you talk with the people in this, people know you cuckoo about this thing. You really love what you're doing. And when the people see you really love what you're doing, they want to work with you because, you know, you dedicate to this stuff.
and you put the time in. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody on this panel, it's not like a part-time gig.
It's a lifestyle, you know what I mean? This is not part-time gig,
And we all talk about life and work balance is a constant balance. And the more busy you are and the more successful you are, the less time you have. So time management becomes a discussion, a never-ending discussion. But I think that you gotta, when you're young, you have nothing to lose. You got to go all in.
Yeah.
And those people that go all in, and then you got to give it a little time. I would say give it 5 years. If you can't get any connections in 2 years, you're not doing something right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought when I moved down to LA, I was like, if the time it takes to become a doctor is about 7 years post grad, then that's if I can survive down here, that's how long I'm gonna make an earnest effort at it.
Yeah, and then as like any form of performance, it takes you a while to get in, and then you got to stay in.
Yeah, that's even harder.
And that's just harder.
I always say it's more easy get to the top than after maintain
stay
in the game.
Absolutely.
Because the moment you show everything, everybody knows they're gonna go after you. So you always got to be innovative, come with something new.
You lose that new appeal of there's the new guy or the new person.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what?
Now
This is what
like,
we
I still got to stay relevant.
But this is what we all have unique. We can all show people the tools, how we're using everything. But what I'm gonna do tomorrow, I don't know, because it's in my brain. I don't know why I'm doing this. I can show you. I have no secret. Everyone can go to Home Depot, buy plywood, nails, and we all gonna build different house because we all thinking different. And that's the beauty about this.
Yeah.
That's
right on.
Well, guys, I want to just say again that we are honored to have you on this chat. This was thank you for sharing this hour with us, a little bit over actually. Why don't we go around and just get an outro going on, just let the stream know where they can find you on social media, kind of like what's going on with you now that you can talk about, and that sort of thing. So let's go to Robert.
All right, so I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and all you have to do is just type my name, Robert Dudzic, and I have website, Robert Dudzic. That's it, simple.
Scott.
Facebook, all over YouTube. What do I do? So I just just finished Mrs. America. Valorant just came out for Riot.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on that for a long time. And everything else I can't talk about. Just keep watching, and thanks for checking in.
Stay tuned. Yeah. Tom.
Yeah, I'm easy. Tom Salta and just .com or Instagram, Facebook. I'm very easy to find. And yes, thanks to the NDAs, I can't talk about what's upcoming, but stay tuned, and a lot of fun things coming out.
Oh, I can say one thing, July 16, but I'm not gonna say what is it.
You're good, Robert.
Stay tuned.
I'm under NDA.
Similarly with Tom and Robert and Scott, I'm under NDAs for all manner of things. But my Instagram and all that stuff is just Jacob Shea Music, and the website's jacobsheamusic.com. It's been a privilege talking with all of you guys.
Likewise.
Guys, it's been great chatting with you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we'll be tuning in. So thanks again, everybody. Happy Friday.
Yeah.
This is the Quarantide crew.
The weekend.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey.
Cheers.
Signing off.
All right.
Cheers.
All right.